Are you looking for a way to advertise your business, offer discounts to your customers, and help veterans at the same time? Then CityByHero.com is the answer. It's your shop local program helping you while providing jobs and funds for veterans. It's simple to sign up, easy for your clients to find your business and your offers, and there are many plans to choose from that fit your budget and your needs. Go to CityByHero.com and sign up today, and we'll make a donation for you to a veterans organization. CityByHero.com.
And now, it's time to Stand for Truth with the host of Stand for Truth Radio, Susan Knowles.
And welcome to the program, everyone. I'm your host, Susan Knowles. So glad that you could join us today. Don't forget to check out my website at susanknowles.com and the articles I write as a contributor for The Blaze and also for WND.com. And don't forget to follow Stand for Truth Radio and a segment I do also called Knowles on the News. Just go to Spreaker.com or the Spreaker phone app, type in Susan Knowles or Stand for Truth Radio, and follow the show there. And as you may know already, our show is also carried on iTunes, and you can also find videos I do on my YouTube channel under Susan Knowles and at Susan Knowles on Twitter. Now, today we are welcoming to the show Patrick Wood, author of Technocracy Rising, The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. He's also the co-author of Trilaterals Over Washington, Volumes 1 and 2, with the late Anthony C. Sutton. His website is technocracy.news, and you can sign up there and receive his newsletters as well. Patrick Wood is a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, and historic technocracy. Wood remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order, which is the essence of sustainable development on a global scale. An economist by education, a financial analyst and writer by profession, and an American constitutionalist by choice, Wood remains a biblical worldview and has deep historical insight into the modern attacks on sovereignty, property rights, and personal freedom. Such attacks are epitomized by the implementation of UN policies such as Agenda 21, sustainable development, smart growth, and in education, the widespread adoption of Common Core state standards. So let's welcome to the show Patrick Wood. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Hi, Susan. Doing fine. Thank you.
Great. I wanted to say before we get started, I wanted to just say that our hearts and our prayers go out to those in Orlando who were killed over the weekend and those that are injured and in the hospital and going through surgeries, and also to the family of Christina Grimmie, who was killed in the same area in Orlando, Florida over the weekend. And reports have it that she may have been killed primarily because of her Christian beliefs. And I just wanted to say that we're all grieving with the families and hope that those that are injured in the hospitals in Orlando there are getting better. And you know, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening, Patrick. I don't know if you have a comment that you want to add.
Well, as far as the Orlando massacre is concerned, this is not the last we're going to see of this, I'm afraid. And the immigration policy that has been allowed and encouraged in our country, which is basically the same policy that's been encouraged in Europe, is going to do the same thing to us that it has done to Europe. And until Americans realize that our government is working against us with this immigration policy to bring all of these people in from the Mideast that hate our guts and that are sworn to destroy us, we're going to continue to have this kind of stuff, and we just simply need to put a stop to it.
You know, and I couldn't agree more, because we have a president who can't say ISIS, Islam terrorists, Muslim terrorists, can't absolutely utter the words of what's really going on, and has come out today and said there are no strong ties that this Omar Mateen had to any radical Muslim type terrorists, which is odd because the Islamic State came out and praised him, and I'm talking about Omar, for doing what he did over the weekend. So it's hard for me to believe that there's no connection to other terrorist sources and all that. And his father, we've seen videos of his father who's connected to the Taliban, supposedly. So I think the American public, they're being fed a line, and hopefully they're not going to believe it.
I know. Probably many people will, because they believe anything that the media tells them. But for the people in your audience and people like you that are out there around the country, they're not going to buy it for a second. Not for 1 second.
Yep. No, and you're right, too. We are going to see more of this, and it's going to be a tax on all of us as Americans, because that is what they are sworn to do, and that is what the book that they believe in tells them to do. And so, I think people are just going to have to be vigilant. They're going to have to start taking care of themselves, and also speaking out to have their government take care of them as well, as much as we can expect the government to take care of us, which at this point seems very little right now.
Exactly.
I'm going to go ahead and bring up some various subjects, and I'm going to, but with technocracy is such a big field, and so I want to bring up just a whole different subject matter and let you comment on those if you can. And there are no particular order. Some of the things that we have heard in the mainstream media, and some of the things that we're just not hearing at all in the mainstream media. First thing I want to bring up to you is, what is this? Explain to us what the law enforcement card reader is and what that's all about.
Well, law enforcement has a new tool, and it's based on the idea, well, actually it's already law in most states around the country, that the police have the right to confiscate money, bank accounts, and property from people who are known to be criminals maybe of a special sort, like people in the drug running business, or maybe terrorists as well. The idea of asset forfeiture is not new, but the police now have a tool to take that to a new level, because there's new technology out now that gives the police essentially, it's like a card reader, like what you have at a store, but it's able to strip the money off out of your account, or if you have a gift card, strip your money off of the gift card right as they confront you or stop you on the street or stop you in your car. They can simply take your money right then, and then it's up to you to get it back, which is good luck. Now, of course, they say they're never going to abuse this, of course, and they're only going to use this for legitimate cases. But as we know, that is never the case when you turn a bunch of, in some cases, power-hungry, policemen loose with a tool like this. There's going to be innocent citizens that get their bank accounts stripped for no particular good reason, and then they're going to have to fight like crazy to get it back again.
Now, is this, when they do that, will they have a court order, or is this just something they, are they just going to do this without a warrant, without a court order? Wow.
No court order necessary. They can just summarily do it at the judgment of the policeman that's doing it. This is being implemented, by the way, right now in Oklahoma in particular, but it's going to spread to the whole country.
And we all know that's a due process violation, because if you don't have an ability to go in and claim that this shouldn't be happening, the money is taken, like you said, before you can do anything about it, and then you have to fight to get it back. Now, I know the IRS can do things like that, but even the IRS has limits. This seems to me like it's limitless power.
It is, actually. And, of course, in the case of the IRS and even in terrorist events, they're required to get a court order. But in many cases, remember that the judges that they have are specially assigned judges that operate in secret. There's no transparency whatsoever. And so when they say they got a court order, it's, well, they had an in-house guy who's called himself a judge that wrote the court order to be served by the same people that work for the same organization. So it's a little bit crazy. Even when you talk about court order, and many times it's already been a twisted form of justice.
And do you know how this got started? Whose idea this was? Who proposed this in the very beginning?
Well, the asset forfeiture laws have been around as long as the war on drugs has been around. That was one of the principal legislative tools that they were given. So it's not ancient, but the powers have been expanded, and there's been plenty of abuses along the way. There's plenty of stories on the internet you can find where people got messed up, got in the middle of this and shouldn't have. Right. And many police departments have enriched themselves, in a way, because they get to keep that money and spend it on their own projects, their own departments and whatever. So the money doesn't go to the government. It doesn't go to the state. It goes to the same agency that confiscates it in the first place. That's obviously one of the huge conflict of interest that exists here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see where a lot of people will lose their homes because they've had all their money taken, and people who will lose their businesses because, if you're trying to run a business and let's say $10,000, $20,000 is taken out of your account, it's going to shut you down, or most people it will. That's a lot of money.
Absolutely. So this is just one more thing. And, this kind of technology developed by people that have a technocrat mindset. And that is that they develop technology because they can, not because there's any good purpose for it or a constitutional purpose. They do it because they can. And so any type of a challenge along these lines, that's just a red flag to them. Oh, boy, let's go out and invent that technology. And then they hand it over to people that will use it and abuse it, and they will escape all scrutiny. Nobody will look at the people who invented this garbage
right.
and ask them questions. Why did you do this? But they should be. I think these are these technocrat type people are the ones that need to be their feet need to be held to close to the fire, and make them tell us why did you do this, and let the American people see this is not the American way.
Well, and I can see this also being used against gun manufacturers. I mean, we're such a heightened sense right now of, let's do something with Second Amendment. It's every other day that we're talking about that, and I could see that being used against the gun manufacturers and having businesses again shut down because of all the money that's been taken out of the accounts for various reasons. And I think people will who are really going after the Second Amendment and our guns will try to think up anything and everything that they can in order to get that money to shut people down who are gun manufacturers.
Right.
Just my thoughts.
The whole yeah, you're right. And the whole area of espionage at this point, I think that's the right term to use in our country, where the government is practicing espionage on our own citizens. This sinks to new lows virtually every week, and people aren't paying attention to this. The intrusiveness of government surveillance into our private lives, but this forfeiture of money is just one more thing. It's like, where is this ever going to stop? Because we hear stuff like this, it just shocks us. There was a story a couple of weeks ago where it was discovered up in San Francisco that the FBI had been planting secret microphones around the city in odd places like trash barrels and bus stops and, public places where they could eavesdrop on private conversations that people might be having when they're standing around. It's like, well, wow. Okay, so where did this come from? How did this happen?
Yeah.
And, if they're doing it in San Francisco and got busted, they're doing it in other cities as well around the country. But, things like this, you shake your head. It just boggles the mind that these people won't stop. They can't get enough intrusiveness. They can't get enough data on us. They have to hide secret microphones now. They're already getting all our email, all of our telephone conversations, all of our social media postings, everything we say, go anywhere, everywhere. There's hundreds of thousands of cameras now around the country taking pictures of us, and we're being cataloged and identified. There's a DNA database we find out now that the NSA and the FBI are building using American citizens to fund it, with the DNA material. And it's like, gosh, Congress stands up and slaps them, and they say, oh, we're really sorry. Sometimes they don't even say that. And then you don't hear anything for 6 months, and all of a sudden you hear another story. And not only did they not stop what Congress slapped them for, but they're doing it twice as much with impunity. They just won't quit.
They just won't quit. And I think one of the reasons they don't quit necessarily is, number one, there's not any public outrage, where the public, I mean, I didn't even know about the thing that, what you're talking about in San Francisco. And the second thing is there are, unfortunately, the society is being trained to say, oh, you know what, that's okay because you might hear a terrorist talking, and if it keeps us safe, let's go ahead and do it. And that's what we're convincing, I think, a lot of members in society, that it's okay. And especially, and I hate to say this, but especially in California, and that's probably why they chose to do it in San Francisco and in California, because we've been taught, oh, it's okay. We're never gonna use this against you. We're just trying to protect you.
And I will suggest that that's a bald-faced lie. It's just not true. Absolutely. And it doesn't stand up to any kind of scrutiny whatsoever. The FBI, by the way, with the shooting in Orlando, the FBI is going to demand increased surveillance and increased powers from Congress. You just watch. I guarantee you this is going to happen. They're going to say, this is the reason that we need to step up our surveillance efforts and blah, blah, blah. And yet, they already have massive surveillance efforts all across society, catching every citizen in the net. And they interviewed this guy supposedly 3 times. The FBI interviewed this terrorist 3 times with terrorist connections, and they never busted him for anything. He continued to work for the DHS contractor, and even when they're watching him like that, they can't catch him before he does something like this. This is insanity. I mean, the FBI has just lost all credibility. What they're doing has nothing to do with national security whatsoever, or they would have busted this guy before he ever got to first base. And I might add, just hypocrisy-wise, the FBI hasn't even interviewed Hillary Clinton yet on her email scandal. Okay, when's this going to start, It's like, they interviewed this terrorist 3 times, and they didn't clamp down on him, obviously, any way, shape, or form. They didn't trail him. They didn't surveil him. They didn't track his phone calls. They didn't track his purchase records, which they probably have somewhere in a database. Right. But no, they have to use it as an excuse now to get, to come back and even have more surveillance on American citizens.
Yeah, and we're learning, too, that his employer didn't want to let him go because he was Muslim. And so, with political correctness, we can't do that. And I'm sure that's part of why the FBI did what they did. It's all political correctness, and we'll just let him go and hope that he doesn't do anything. And then when he does, we'll blame it on Second Amendment, guns, and we'll try to take the guns away, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
If people don't understand that by now, that this is cyclical, and this is what the government says each and every time, and this is what they're doing, it is really time to wake up. I mean, it truly is time. It's past time to wake up.
Yes, it is.
And I wanted to ask you, I wanted to go on to another subject. I know that the U.S. and China are doing a lot of things in terms of robots and machines to take over for the workers. Can you talk about that?
Well, this is the heartbeat of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. That's what they call it. It's of great concern to everybody globally because predictions are now, that is, let's say, very plausible predictions have come out that have said by the year 2045 that most all of the jobs that people currently do will be done by robots. That means massive unemployment for people all around the world. And the social consequences of this are unknown at this point. But if you can imagine, I mean, how can all those people around the world be out of work, not have money to spend, et cetera, et cetera? But the robot revolution right now is very, very pervasive. It's just getting started, but industry after industry are toppling. One big factory in China, in fact, the company that makes iPhones over there, Foxconn, they had one factory where they were able to reduce their workforce by 60,000 people out of 110,000 people, and by replacing them with robots. The Western press barely batted an eye, but can you imagine? I mean, the people that lost their jobs, I guess maybe they didn't have a job when they first got one, but they're not too happy about losing their jobs to robots. And but Foxconn, on the other hand, is very happy because they can control the robots. They don't complain, they don't commit suicide, and they don't demand overtime. And all you got to do is oil them once in a while and keep their software updated. It's like, okay, that sounds real compassionate.
It's coming here, right?
It's coming here. Yeah, it is already. It's already happening here.
I'm wondering how much of the let's push for $15 an hour is sort of the technocrats' way of pushing us into that without saying, "Hey, we're going to replace you with robots. We're just going to make it like, well, it's because we couldn't do the $15 an hour." I mean, I maybe I'm just sort of I'm jaded now, And
yeah.
You wonder how they're connected and if this is something that they're pushing in order to make us feel like it's just a natural thing that's happening, because of the fact that nobody can afford to pay $15 an hour, therefore we're going to go to robots, where they were going to do it anyway.
Yep.
This is just sort of an excuse. Oh,
yep.
Wow.
Yep, exactly. There was a very interesting article, Susan, that there's a company called Y Combinator up in the Bay Area. That is a very elite organization that helps startups, tech startups in the Bay Area. And the president of that company, by the way, Sam Altman, happened to also attend the Bilderberg meeting in Europe this weekend. So this is a significant organization. They have an experiment underway right now where they're selecting up to 100 people to receive $2,000 a month free income, to find out how people will react if they lose their job to robotics. And they're going to track these people, psychologists are, for a year to find out what people do with the money, how they live, how they survive, how their thinking changes and stuff. And the interesting thing about this is this guy is admitting that robots are going to displace the workforce, number one. And number two, this is the first official study to find out what's really going to happen. So they're going to have some actual data when the study is done. Then the head of this company, Sam Altman, runs off to the Bilderberg Society or Bilderberg meeting in Europe, and they're talking about this and they're watching it like a hawk. So, it may well be as robotics take over, it may well be that the global elite figure this is how we're going to do it. We're going to introduce a currency, a type of currency that will be able to dole out to people as a stipend, kind of like they do in some countries now where you have a guaranteed income. We will send money out to people to spend, and that's all they're going to get. There would be no other way to earn money except to get your allotment every month or every whatever, like food stamps, And
yeah.
But the thing with this type of currency is the currency will expire at the end of your allotment. So, in other words, a shelf date. So if you don't spend it within 30 days or 60 days, it simply will expire and you'll have to wait for your next allocation. Well, this is really the heartbeat of technocracy, again, because technocracy prescribed an energy currency that would be given out free to all the citizens of the nation, regardless of where you work, and that would be their stipend for the month or the quarter or whatever period of time they chose that you would have to spend, and it would expire at the end of the period. This is, to me, after studying technocracy, this is very thinly veiled, watching them do this experiment up in San Francisco. But this seems to be where it's headed in the end, that they'll have to be forced to introduce some type of a basic universal income that will take care of everybody in society.
Well, and then you wonder how much, you can't afford to keep people alive necessarily. I'll just put it that way. When they're, you're just getting more and more people, and you're going to run out of money at some point, and you have to wonder. Again, I know I'm jaded. I'm getting more and more jaded, but you have to wonder things like the new California law, where you're allowed now assisted suicide. How much of that is going to be tied in with, let's say, your medical care, saying, well, you know what, I think you've come to this age, and we're not going to go ahead and give you that operation, and you may want to think about assisted suicide, and then at the same time, it alleviates the need for that universal income.
Yep. You're exactly right. It's incremental, almost in every case, and even though it sounds innocent and innocuous at the beginning, it always ends up to be a disaster in the end.
Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it, because I've seen so much of it that you just can't sit back and go, oh well, that's not connected to that, or that'll never happen. It is happening. It happens every day. More and more that we're seeing stuff that's happening that we never thought we would see before.
Right. Even Roe versus Wade, you could look at that and say, well, the argument originally was, well, what about when women get raped, or what about when there's cases of incest, And that was a lot of the argument that was given at the beginning of Roe v. Wade. But now, how many, 45 million babies have been killed since then? And the vast majority of those, obviously, were not rapes or incest. They're just people say, hey, I think I want to have an abortion today, so where do I go?
Right. And we fund it, continue to fund it.
Yeah, that's right. Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer money, and then we go after the guy who takes the videographer. We go after him. So
that's right.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
and also now there's something out of Germany with robots who can feel pain. What is that all about?
Well, the whole area of robotics is designed to make robots human-like. Not that they would look human-like necessarily. That's the easy part. But to get the artificial intelligence process to think human, to think like humans. And so robots are being designed. People are working on the senses, eyesight, hearing, interpreting what you see and what you hear, and smell, things like that. And then, other groups of scientists are working on some of the psychological basis of it, like, how can a self-learning robot pass a psychological test, like running a maze, for instance, like, solving a maze puzzle. And that's what psychologists do when they test people. They give them these little tests, like ink blot tests, right? Well, what do you think about that? Well, can you do this simple problem? What's 2 + 3? And they test their psychological condition. Well, a group of scientists are now using that kind of technique to determine the state of artificial intelligence today. Is it really becoming intelligent or not? And we already know the answer to that. It is. But this is just evidence that we're in for some very serious difficulties in the future, because if these programs become human-like, we will never know who we're talking to on the phone, for instance, and sometimes even in person, perhaps. Well, we're not going to know who we're communicating with. There was a university, I can't remember which one right now, but there was a major university that had a graduate class where the teaching assistant, one of the teaching assistants was a robot, and it was a robotic program. It wasn't a person looking like a robot, but it was a program robot, and the students were communicating via email and text messages and stuff with this teaching assistant. And at the end of the day, informed them all along that her name was not, Susie or whatever, but that she was actually a robot program. And the students just freaked because they were totally convinced that she was a real person. And they'd interact with her for weeks and weeks, and they were totally convinced that she was a real person, and it freaked them out.
As it should. I don't even know how they can legally get away with doing things like that. It's unbelievable.
Well, actually, I guess, as they said, the teaching assistant was really quite good. She answered all the questions and stuff. probably better than her human counterpart could,
Yeah, always seemed to be in a great mood. Never skipped a beat. Never missed a class.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Let's talk about biohackers. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that is?
Well, I don't know if you kind of like having those RFID chips planted into your skin, there's really nothing to talk about here. But this it bothers
have
me.
Your car
I don't know about you. I say that facetiously,
yeah.
I guess. The idea of biohacking at this point is really a misnomer. There are scientists and engineers that are working on all kinds of different implantable objects that will go into your body. And, they call it biohacking because, it's kind of like hacking the human body instead of a computer. But, these little microchips, they're as small as a grain of rice. That's really small. And they can be implanted into your skin very quickly and easily. You don't need a stitch or anything. It's like a needle poke, you get a vaccine. And there's various places in the body they can poke them. In the hand, for instance, there's lots of little skin pockets of skin where you can put something and you'd never know it was there in 1,000 years. And, people are designing these little implantables now for all kinds of things, like unlocking doors or using something like Apple Pay, payment at a kiosk where you instead of tapping it with your cell phone, you tap it with your hand. Identification, like instead of wearing an ID card with a magnetic strip in it or something, you can have a chip in your hand that will identify you when you walk through a door as the right person. And the list goes on. The reasons, the purposes, people are doing it for medical reasons, like putting all your medical history on a chip and implanting it. And, of course, for the Christian world, the Christian audience, this would make them very, very nervous because of, Revelation, that the book of Revelation that talks about the mark of the beast being on your hand or on your forehead. So, there's lots of reasons to be concerned about this kind of technology. But it is spreading, Susan, like wildfire right now. And people are all excited about it because it's the latest gadget, the latest thing. And, you wonder at first, how could anybody seriously do this? Well, look, if you haven't ever followed the people in the tattoo world, the big craze now in the tattoo world are changing your body, your physical body. Like people are having horns implanted on their head now, for instance. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? They want to, I guess they want to look like the devil. They're actually having horns implanted on their foreheads. And there's all kinds of different body modifications like that are being done now. And people are just going nuts over it. Wow, I want to be different. I want to look like so and so or whatever. And it's like, man, dude, slow down. Take a breath and look at what you're doing to yourself. But the biohacking stuff is going to be accepted in the same way by a certain segment of the population. They'll think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Absolutely. And I think the millennials will be the first to really embrace it because it's something new and unique and they're always in on kind of the latest craze of things that are happening. But, I'm like you. Why do they call this biohacker? Because, hacking is something that somebody does that also is you're not giving them permission to do. They do this without your permission. These people are doing the biohacking. They're absolutely going in and wanting these chips implanted, volunteering for them, and it's no big deal to them. And I'm surprised that the body piercers are the ones that are typically the ones that are implanting these chips, aren't they?
Well, they're receiving it quite well, I think, because they're already used to having weird things done to their bodies. There's a greater view of this. If you think, for instance, about prisoners, I know you're probably familiar with this. Prisoners that are put out on house arrest have to wear an anklet, right. And it monitors their physical presence. They're not allowed to leave their house or maybe a certain area or something, and all of those bracelets, for instance, that criminals currently wear could be completely replaced by a bioimplantable chip. All they have to do is just implant it under their skin and their hand or something like that. That'd be the end of it. And you wouldn't have to worry about them cutting the bracelet off or anything else. They're probably not going to cut their hand apart to get the chip out. But that's an example where you could easily see a police department going, "Wow, we look at the money we could save. It's a little chip instead of a big old ankle thing that you can't reuse, and you have to, and we can buy these for pennies on the dollar, where this other system costs us hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars." You can see the logic right now why they would adopt this kind of technology. And then you look at the medical world. What about people that are on Medicare? They could very easily say, this is a condition of Medicare. You have to accept this implant because wherever you go, we want to have your medical history with you.
Well, and I could see them doing that with the VA, because it seems like the veterans a lot of times are the guinea pigs, to the government. And I could see them saying, well, instead of us losing your file all the time, in which I think they do a lot, they can implant their medical records right into the veteran. And, I can see that easily happening to different sections of society. And the people I'm not sure people are going to want to speak up anymore because they seem to be accepting this more and more each day. And we're losing the people who would stand up against this, and we're replacing them with people who have been taught the government is your friend, the government's going to help you, just listen to the government, don't think, do what you're told.
Exactly. We've talked, I've talked about the aspect of scientific dictatorship before with relation to technocracy. And this is where this is headed. This kind of digital monitoring and slicing and dicing of our data and stuff, complete lack of transparency and or privacy anymore. You remember George Orwell, of course, that wrote the book Brave New World in 1932. Well, he wrote another book in 1958 called Brave New World Revisited, in which he kind of recapped his thoughts after 26 years of writing the first book. He wrote this other book, let's take a second look at this. And he wrote at the end of it, he said, most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. You think of people looking at their iPhones and their Samsungs and everything on the street. And then he said, there seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown. And that's a direct quote. That's a very disturbing insight from the man who wrote the book in the first place. But this is exactly what's happening today. The young people that are growing up in this are in love with their servitude. They don't even realize that they're being collared, if you will.
Right.
So you can carry your iPhone or whatever, your Samsung phone or whatever it is you got. You carry that phone around, you're being tracked 24/7. What you say and do with that phone, you're being tracked 24/7. You have no clue that people are watching from the outside, taking your marketing data, all your habits and stuff. All of that data is being ripped off from you and being sold to the highest bidder, other companies and stuff, to figure out how better to get your money out of your pocket and into their pocket. But they love their servitude, and they don't care. Even when you tell them about this, they say, so what?
Yeah.
We don't care.
So what?
We're having our fun.
And see, they've never grown up at a time where there wasn't this type of servitude. I mean, you think about it. These people, a lot of them weren't even around after 9/11 is when they were born. A lot of people that are being raised now to just expect that you have to go in and have everybody in the airport take your clothes off, your shoes off, and everything else. That's what they've grown up with. That's what they know. And so this is like, again, one more thing. It's like, okay, well, you're keeping me safe. It's okay. I'm not doing anything. And if you want my information, it's all right with me. And they don't look at the broader, darker side of what can happen. And they're not being taught that by anybody either. So, can't really expect anything else.
By the way, TSA is a good example of where you could see the biochip stuff.
Yeah.
You've heard of the TSA PreCheck service now, I'm sure, where you can pay $85 and get on a PreCheck flight list where you don't have to go through all the security and stuff that everybody else goes through. Identification is one of the biggest problems they have. It's like, well, you may have paid your $85, but how do we know it's you? And so there are various ways. They could use facial identification. They could use fingerprints, perhaps. But having a biochip implanted in your hand would be a very, I could see a very attractive way of identifying people definitively, because you see the biochip could contain all the information on your fingerprints. And so if you put your hand down on something on a scanner, it reads your biochip at the same time it reads your fingerprints, and if they don't match, you're out of there. You know.
Yeah.
But if it does match, you get a perfect identification.
Yeah, it's just like you wonder where they're going to stop, and the answer is clearly they're not going to stop.
No, they're not.
Let's talk for a minute about politics, and I know you have in Arizona there Kelly Ward, who's running to unseat Senator John McCain, and I've heard a lot of there's an anti-Agenda 21 smear campaign going on. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I sure do. Kelly is she's a good lady. I've met her a couple of times. I really like her. She's a doctor, actually, a very capable woman. She's not a tinfoil hat person at all, but she has chosen to run against John McCain. And I wouldn't say that was her first mistake, but that was her first mistake, is running against John McCain. Yeah. Because John McCain has more dirty tricks in his bag, probably even than Hillary Clinton. He's been at it longer. And so his bag is bigger even at this point. And he is a rat and a snake. And he has initiated a smear campaign on Kelly Ward, his opponent, to completely discredit her with all this kind of conspiracy theory charges and stuff. You name it, from Agenda 21 to chemtrails. I think they're calling her in an ad campaign Chemtrail Kelly. I think that's the headline. And they're running this campaign using Google ad Google ads or something like that, where anybody in Arizona that would vote for her, anytime they go to some website that's activated with Google ads, her ad comes up in your face. And this is virtually 80% of the websites you could possibly go to on the internet. Her ad will pop up. If you live in Arizona, it's geospecific. Her ad will pop up in your face, Chemtrail Kelly. It's got a horrible black and white picture of her, makes her look like a monster. And they've been running this now for at least a month, and I'm sure they're going to keep it up until the vote later this summer. But Kelly's getting smeared. She doesn't deserve any of it. She really does understand Agenda 21. She understands technocracy, I might add, as well, because we've had an opportunity to talk. And, she's just getting blasted by this, same old kind of stuff they used to pull on me 30, 40 years ago. They're doing it with her. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why people are so sick and tired of the politics as usual, because, look at this. You're supposed to have this senator who's supposed to be professional, and he's doing stuff like that when he knows it's not true. I mean, he knows it's not true. And again, politics has become very dirty, very dirty, even more so than it used to be.
It really has. And a friend of mine a few years ago reminded me that the most dangerous place in Arizona is to get between John McCain and the cameraman.
Yeah.
If you get my drift. He loves the media and he wants it his way, So don't block the camera shot.
Well, and it's unfortunate because he's hidden behind a lot of what he's gotten away with. He's hidden behind because he's a war hero. And it's in the past you weren't able to even speak about John McCain in any type of negative words or at all because he's a war hero. And nobody can ever take that away from him. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that shouldn't be discussed.
That's for sure. But that also was a very clever public relations trick that they started early on to paint him as a war hero, and that made him like just pure Teflon. Nothing sticks to him because of that. But there are people in Arizona, I have to say, that are as old as he was and that were in the military at that time. And there's plenty of criticism on his, at least not to paint him like some kind of a patron saint of anything. Yeah, he was in the military. Yeah, he was a prisoner of war. Yeah, he was shot down and all that good stuff. But on the other hand, he weren't no saint. And,
Right.
to make him out to be well, he's the perfect war hero of all time, like he's General Patton or something. It's just not true. But it was a good ploy on his part to position himself that way, because you can't throw a rock at him now.
Well, and it's the same thing that we're seeing with Hillary Clinton. I mean, talk about Teflon. Nothing sticks to her. I mean, we have had case after case after case, and if these accusations were coming out against you or me, we'd be in jail right now. We wouldn't be out on the presidential campaign trail. So and people still want to vote for her, which I can't understand. But I think a lot of people just do not understand anything about her past or what connections there are, because the media has done such a great job with her and trying to keep her out of the limelight of any wrongdoing, that it's working well for her.
It really is, and I just wonder if she's going to could get indicted before the general election this fall. The FBI has been sitting on all this evidence about her emails and stuff. I think anybody with any common sense knows she's guilty or in sin, but the Justice Department will not indict. And they've been just sitting on their hands, and they're just as corrupt as the day is long in the Justice Department. They refuse to indict this woman. And so, people can look at that and say, what a perversion of justice in our country. Here's this criminal walking around. And then you've got, for instance, all the people up at the Malheur, demonstration when the ranchers took over the lodge up in Oregon. All the people that got arrested up there are still in jail without warrant. I mean, not without warrant, but they're in jail. Even people like Pete Santilli, who went up there to cover. He's a radio host, if you don't know him.
Right.
He went up there to cover, journalistically, to cover what was going on up there. He got arrested and caught up in it as well, and he's still in jail. And he wasn't even part of it. I'm sure he sympathized with him, or he wouldn't have been there. But all of these people are still in jail, waiting their various trial dates and stuff. And it's like some of them did absolutely nothing. Put them away, and oh well, that's the justice system.
And there they will probably rot, unfortunately, because again, there aren't too many people coming out against what happened, and a lot of people don't want to get involved, and it just kind of it's until it happens to your family, then they really sometimes people start to really care. And it's just unfortunate. But we're seeing more and more of stuff like this, whether you believe in their cause or not. We're seeing more and more of the government going out and doing whatever they want to do, not having to explain anything of why they're doing it. And that's not a republic. That isn't. And, people, if they're not worried about their constitutional rights, again, they ought to be, because they're disappearing very rapidly.
They are. And I figure we probably have a window, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 years at this point, to put an end to this impending scientific dictatorship, or basically forget it for the next 150, 200 years, maybe hundreds of years before they can break free from it. But like Huxley said, if people love their servitude, there will be no reason to overthrow a scientific dictatorship.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's just something that people have gotten used to. The younger people have never known anything else, and it'll be very easy to do the transition. What's going on in the world of climate change right now?
Well, climate change is still the biggest scam in history as far as I'm concerned. The people promoting climate change refuse to give up their dogma. Of course, they can't, because if they say, well, we're wrong, then all the rest of their arguments for sustainable development fall apart, and I think the whole scam would fall apart. So they continue to promote the climate change idea, and it's when Al Gore said a few months ago that climate deniers deserve to be punished. This is actually being worked out in practice now. This is astounding. There was the Portland, Oregon school board voted recently to ban all material that is anti-climate change from the school system. So the libraries are being stripped, the classrooms are being stripped, and the students are being told, don't even think about anything that's critical, climate change. It's a done deal, it's settled, science is settled, and we're not going to tolerate any opposing position whatsoever. So they simply just banned the books. Now, this is America, folks. This is not communist China. This is America. And you don't do this kind of stuff in America. Banning books? That's nuts. And so where do you stop? Where do we stop? Will the next be book burning parties? You know, where these religious zealots that are following climate change mantra will physically go and take books out of public libraries and stuff and start burning them in the streets? See, where does this stop? It's already started. That's clear.
Yeah, it's already started.
And in Portland, they shot the first volley, you know, but it's coming. It's going to expand like crazy.
Well, and I always, you know, I keep saying it almost every week, and I know people probably get sick and tired of hearing it, but why aren't people looking into homeschooling? And I do understand all the things of you know, parents having to work and two people needing to be out there and everything else, but the children are being brainwashed in places like what you just described. And if you don't want your child to end up that way, you can't put them and raise them in that environment, or they will. You know, so I mean, it's just, to me, it's simple. So I don't know what the solution is for people, but it's simple. You either agree with it or you disagree and you do something else.
That's right. And parents should take responsibility for their children. I mean, they give lip service. Well, you know, I love little Billy. I love my little Susie. Yeah, well, you say you love them, but, you know, you throw them to the wolves when you let them go to school every day. Don't give me that stuff. If you loved them, you do something to protect them and educate them correctly. But what's going to happen here in the end is going to be what's happened in Germany and Switzerland and other countries where homeschooling has been illegal. It's been illegal to educate at home. And there's a big movement, well, especially in California, but across the country, to outlaw homeschooling altogether. Yep. And we know it's coming. It's in Germany. A parent will get thrown in jail if you don't send your kids to government school. Same thing in Switzerland. I know because I have a good friend that got run out of Germany and then run out of Switzerland for trying to homeschool his children. And it's ugly, folks. It's ugly, and it's coming here one day. You will not be able to homeschool your children. And, you know, then you're going to wonder, gee, how'd that happen? It became illegal all of a sudden. Well, it's because nobody really dealt with the issue now, like times like to put up a barrier against this kind of thinking, or just to route this thinking out altogether and, reform your own communities right where you live. It's your school board, for Pete's sake, wherever you live. You've got a school board. It's your school board that's doing this to you. Go in there and raise a ruckus and tell them you ain't going to put up with it anymore. There's absolutely no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. I've seen for so many years the peer pressure, if you will, put on parents to conform, just like what we used to talk about in school as kids, with a lot of peer pressure to do something. And the parents have now, and they're told that the school is the authority and you must do what we tell you to do. And I've said this before. I used to have people that would bring their kids during the day to see me, and they were terrified, you know, because I'm a therapist, and they were terrified to bring the children out. And they're like, oh, you need to sign a note so I can get my child back in so it'll be okay. I'm like, excuse me, you are the parent. You know, if you want to take your child out for an hour or whatever, you don't need to have the school's permission and have them know what your child is doing. It's none of their business that their child is seeing a therapist even.
That's right.
No, that's not. It's not good for the child in school. I mean, teachers talk. I'm sorry, they do.
According to Common Core now, they want to have all that information in their records, so they will.
Right. If
they knew a child was going to a therapist outside the school, they would pursue that data so they get it into their file permanently. Yeah,
absolutely. And, and there's just so much that, I know parents are very busy, but something has to change, because if it doesn't, we are on a slippery slope that we just go faster and faster down, and pretty soon it's going to be so late that there's going to be no turning back. There's not going to be anybody standing with you at the school board. And as it is right now, it's very difficult. Parents don't want to make waves because they want to be able to send their kid off to school and not have to worry about what's going on between the kid and the teacher. And I get that. But it's not helping you, and it's not helping the kid, So
that's right. That's right. We're going down a very steep ski slope where it started out slow on the bunny hill, and all of a sudden it gets steeper and steeper, and you realize that you're really gaining speed, and you go, "Gosh, I'm going too fast to stop now." Then you look ahead, and all of a sudden you see a 200-foot jump coming up. And it's like, oh no.
I know. What do I do now? And then,
what do I do now? And this is kind of what we're looking at right now. If we don't stop this thing, we're going to be facing the biggest train wreck that history has ever seen.
Yeah. Well, and when you see parents that are escorted or arrested out of school board meetings because they dare to stand up and say anything in opposition, I mean, that right there is insane. And I can't believe that every parent doesn't stand up around that person and say, no, we are not going to have this. You work for us. But it's the same thing that we see in our government. They used to work for us, and now I think we work for them. And it's really gotten way off track. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Exactly.
Well, as always, it's been a pleasure having you on today. And as always, the time just absolutely flies by. We're going to have to do a 2 or 3 hour show to try to get everything in. But Patrick Wood, author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, and your website again is at technocracy.news.
That's correct.
I thank you. Your book, I still use your book as a reference, and I hope people go out and get that book.
I do too. They really need to read it and understand what's going on.
Yeah, I know when I read that book, I was absolutely floored, but it taught me things that I never even heard of, and you will never hear of. And people really need to go get that book, sit with it, read it, and then keep it and use it as a resource, a reference like I do. So thank you for writing it. I hope you continue to write more and more so that you can get the word out to all the people who are sitting there at this point maybe even wondering what technocracy is.
Yep, that is my intention for sure.
Good. Well, Patrick, again, thank you so much for coming on, and really appreciate having you here and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Susan. God bless you.
God bless you. Take care. So there you have it. So much. I mean, we didn't even get to. Everything is going at breakneck speed, and you have to know that what you're being told is not what is happening. What the government is telling you, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think by this point most of us know what we know, and that is we're not getting the full information. We're being told what they want us to know, just as with Iran deal. We weren't told about that. We weren't told about how the negotiations had been going on like a year prior, and everything had basically been done before the negotiations started. So if you want to sit there and just believe everything that you're told, I guess that you will. But if you really want to know the truth, you're going to have to do your own research, read books like Technocracy Rising, so that you can understand exactly what's going on, what you're not being told. And then when you see things, you will understand, like, oh my gosh, this is something that I should have had knowledge about, and now I do. And now I can see things for what they really are, and then maybe try to bring other people in to try to come up with solutions on what needs to be done. It is a fast-going, slippery slope. We need to do something, and we need to do it now in order for us to maintain any kind of semblance of America. So thank you so much for being here. Until next time, this is Susan Knowles wishing you a great week. God bless you. Take care. Hi, I'm Susan Knowles. Do you often feel that our world is upside down, where fiction has become fact and America seems to be unrecognizable? Then you'll want to read my fiction, Freedom's Fight, A Call to Remember. Go on a journey with Bethany, who longs for the country she once knew, before the regime took over and changed it beyond recognition. Go with her on her quest to return America to its rightful place. Order Freedom's Fight: A Call to Remember at Amazon.com today.